Well, there's a vital crowd here today. I do invite anyone who's on peripheries of the room to step inside, and maybe those of you that are sort of pretending to be the skirt of the audience might like to come forward. It might make us feel a bit better. I'd like to introduce you to James Christian, who is part of a team called Projects Office. And I guess a title, there's been a sort of running battle as to which architecture practice can actually find the most concrete name going. So this one's pretty concrete. It could just be called Office. It could just be called anyway, that's provocative in its own right. James studied architecture at the Royal College of Art. When actually I was there as the head of department, and he and two other RCA graduates formed their practice 7 years ago. Over that time, they've forged a distinct way of working, not an aesthetics or a traditional iterative design process, but designing together, which is the theme of this festival, and that is with people that are going to inhabit their design. Projects Office always set out to listen and to engage in creative exchange, often with the shy or the disadvantaged. So please welcome James Christian to the stage. Thank you. Bravo.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, so I'm James. I co-founded Projects Office in 2015 with Megan Charnley and Beth and Kay. And yeah, we met at the RCA in 2009. We work under the ethos of fantastic pragmatism. We think laterally, solve problems imaginatively, and take fun seriously. We're a practice that's dedicated to designing with and for people. So some of our projects, this is a furniture campus. It's in a historic conservation area up in Yorkshire, and it's the reorganisation of a series of existing buildings, including a former chapel and clog iron factory. We are also adding this new entrance building with its sawtooth roof profile that will be a new showroom for the business. One of the more significant projects that we currently have on our books is this new build community and education centre for a Coptic Orthodox church in Croydon in South London. And as a practice, a lot of our work involves the design of interior spaces, including the hospitality sector. So this is a specialty coffee shop located near St James's Park in central London. We have a particular specialism in workplace design, particularly for tech startups and software companies. This is Recce. They make software that connects chefs with restaurateurs and produce suppliers. It's a communication system. And we were tasked with creating an office sort of structured entirely around food. It features this table with many corners that encourages convivial conversation and shared lunch times for the whole team. A lot of our projects are quite temporal. This is a shop window that we did for Uniqlo a couple of years ago. It features these mechanical flapping pigeons that weave together brightly coloured yarns in the display. And trade shows, this is the 100% Design Show auditorium space from a couple of years ago. And as a young practice, needless to say, we have to enter a lot of competitions, which we mainly lose. This one was a system for small railway stations that could be built throughout the UK. We took a modular approach that allows for a variety of different programs and responds to different contexts. Our projects take a narrative approach, and I hope you'll sort of see this. We call this one the community castle. It uses the structure and the plan of a historic castle for a series of programs, including a community hall and cricket pavilion. And in 2018, we were shortlisted to design the Dulwich Picture Gallery Pavilion. Our design extended the language of the gallery, designed by Sir John Soane. In particular, we wanted to reference the mausoleum space with its kind of bright yellow light. And we use this to kind of create this wide open column-free event space with this kind of ombre of colored lights from the fins on the roof. Our interest in communal spaces was explored in this exhibition at the Design Museum that followed my residency there in 2014. The project sought to add additional housing and workspaces to existing 20th century housing estates in London. It also explored the desires of occupants to personalize their homes and shared spaces. So we've called this talk Broken Engagements, but we're actually really interested in making a success of this. We like to involve people who will use the spaces in their creation. So when you hear the word stakeholder engagements, you often think of this, something that might happen in, as I said, enforced process in the planning system, an architect presenting a completed design and asking for feedback that won't be acted upon. Instead, we like to involve people from the very outset of the project, particularly children and young people, and we like to do this through games and activities. And I'm going to run through 5 of our different approaches. The first is be indirect. Anyone can ask a question, but often a direct response actually isn't that useful. Engage people through activities to put them at ease so that they share what they really think. Often the asides are the most useful. Keep talking, maintain the dialogue, take your stakeholders with you from the start through construction to completion. Seek feedback all the way. Limit it. If it's a co-design project, limiting the outcome can lead to more tangible outcomes. It's better to create something clear and meaningful or co-author the brief than try to co-design everything. Repeat it. With public engagement, keep repeating the process. Take what you learn and share with it as you progress. And finally, live it. When a project is complete, go back and experience it. Spend as much time as possible, and you never know what you might learn. So, sort of shortly after founding our practice, we wanted to explore the fact that we felt that community consultation often didn't work. So we asked ourselves this sort of slightly silly question: what would happen if every member of a community really did get what they wanted? And this was commissioned by Coin Street Community Builders, who started as a campaign organisation and ended up developing a whole stretch of the south bank of the Thames in central London, including Oxo Tower Wharf and the Coin Street housing. And so we decided to play a game, which is a sort of version of the old parlour game of Consequences. And this was kind of gently poke fun of the consultation process. So in case you don't know, Consequences is a game you play with a group of people. You have a series of prompts, and then together you co-author a story. But you don't really know what the story is until the end of the game. So you write a prompt, and then you pass the sheet on, and the next one. So we thought this would be quite a fun way to kind of co-author a project brief. We played the game with a variety of different community groups, from housing association tenants groups to the design tenants at Oxo Tower Wharf. Needless to say, the results were ridiculous. So this one here, which we turned into a pavilion, the design tenants at Oxo Tower Wharf want to build a temple which is monumental, but the management landlord wants to build beach huts which are crammed with chickens. It looks beautiful. It will be built of marble and straw bales. It needs to have green energy. The local people feel energized. The world said, what? We also created a series of architectural models. And the project was kind of intended to be kind of deliberately silly, but it makes a very, very serious point that engagement is not about individual wants, but instead in revealing a shared narrative. So next up, be indirect. So we've been interested in design for mental health since the early days of our practice. And this began with our involvement in a project called Mad Love. This is an arts project led by the artist James Leadbitter, better known as the Vacuum Cleaner. And it works with mental health service users, professionals, families, and carers. And it takes a very sensorial approach to sort of thinking about mental health spaces. So it asks questions like, what does good mental health smell like, or taste like, or feel like? The workshops are conducted in arts organisations, and there's always an illustrator present to kind of depict the outcome. It's willfully utopian and has the ambition of creating the ideal environment for mental health care. So working alongside another design researcher from the Royal College of Art, Benjamin Kozlowski, our role has been to spatialise some of the ideas kind of co-created in this workshop. And it began with an installation at Fact Gallery in Liverpool. This also explored sort of various kind of spatial qualities and ideas on privacy and togetherness. So the designer's role is very important to kind of translate and synthesize. And we were lucky to have been commissioned following the Liverpool installation by the Wellcome Collection to create a sort of installation as part of their Bedlam exhibition. We wanted to kind of communicate a wide variety of interior spatial conditions. So we decided to use a landscape to sort of reveal this. It's a landscape of interiors. And this took the form of a very large architectural model. It's 2 meters in diameter. And we use the topography to denote privacy. So private spaces are on the hillside and communal spaces are in the valley below. And then there's this kind of activity strip within the center. There are spaces like this bakery, which is about communal cooking and eating. It has a large bread oven. It has intimate spaces, but also very importantly, and this is a recurring theme, spaces to retreat. There's a town square, and we use furnishings to kind of denote activities. We wanted people viewing the model to kind of visualize themselves within these interior spaces. The bedrooms, instead of kind of the corridors that you usually find in hospitals, take the form of a forest of trees on a hillside. And there's a gallery space for kind of art therapy, exhibitions, and displays. And this leads us on to a next project. So we were lucky enough to win an open competition to design the interiors of a children's hospital in Edinburgh. We were charged with working on the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services unit as part of a new hospital. And this was to merge 2 existing units within the city, a day unit for under 12s and a day and inpatient unit for 12 to 18-year-olds. We won with a program of engagement workshops based on Mad Love, where we worked with the 2 main age groups of children, their parents, carers, and the staff of the 2 existing units. Very importantly, we maintained dialogue with staff throughout the project. It was important to seek the input of a wide range of people, and this ranged from clinical staff to cleaners. We find that cleaners often know the most about the building because they have the most kind of intimate relationship with its physical fabric. And we consulted with the same group of people as the design developed. We identified a hierarchy of priorities with the staff, and this, because it was a National Health Services project, had to make use of limited funding. And we also created a system of objects and surfaces for our interior interventions. This took the form of a kit of parts, allowing staff to make choices from a shopping list of interventions, simple wall treatments to storage to systems and inserted structures. The unit is located at the bottom of the hospital and is partially below ground. There are some courtyards which we enhanced with artwork and play equipment. So in response to those sensorial questions about what does mental health feel like, smell like, etc., we had this kind of recurring set of responses that involved the coast and seaside as a kind of calming and sort of pleasant place to be. So we used this to kind of form a narrative thread that ran through the unit. And this ranged from kind of pastel hues of seaside towns, quite playful spaces for young children, to a more rugged offshore theme for the older children, with kind of deeper colours and these maritime signal pennants. Some important spaces, such as this communal space, suffered from a sort of lack of natural light. So we pushed the ceiling up, adding LED panels to create a sense of being in a vaulted, top-lit space, when in fact you're actually at the bottom of a multi-storey hospital. A key feature in this space was this lighthouse structure. So this structure kind of drew on those ideas of privacy that we'd explored earlier, and it created a space for patients to retreat from the action. We worked quite hard with staff to kind of create openings and maintain sight lines to ensure safety. and make sure that they could look out for the patients for all times. In other spaces, some of the parents had told us about lack of kind of places to sit for visiting time. So we made sure that we created as many kind of seating opportunities as possible, such as the games room on the left. And the dining room, which is a kind of very charged space, particularly with adolescent patients who have some really very serious eating disorders. We kind of borrowed from hospitality design to create booths to create a kind of sense of seclusion and privacy and reduce distraction. One parent told us how difficult it was to visit her daughter, where the only place to sit was actually on the bed. And this was a very unnatural way for parents to sit with their teenage child. So we designed a kind of movable window seat that allowed the room to be configured in a variety of different ways for visiting times. We also learned that young residents wanted to personalize their spaces. So we created these kind of magnetic wall boards for display of posters, postcards, objects, books, and things like that. And these facilitate very rapid changeover to ensure that when a patient is discharged, someone new can move into the space immediately. So we knew that we wanted to create spaces that were neither clinical nor institutional. But one parent suggested that we should also avoid the domestic. She felt that creating a space that was artificially homely could actually collude with the anorexic state of mind of her daughter. So we sort of were quite kind of struck by this and actually wanted to kind of draw more on the fact that a psychiatric hospital is a very strange place. So we actually wanted to kind of willfully embrace, just subtly, that element of surrealism in the spaces we created. Obviously, we wanted them to still be kind of comfortable and cosseting and warm, which we did so through lighting and sort of quite unusually for a healthcare environment, the use of kind of darker wall colors. So next up is limit it, and this applies to co-design. And this is about limiting the focus to create truly tangible outcomes. About a year ago, we won a competition to create a wayfinding strategy for the Nine Elms regeneration zone. This includes the American Embassy area. It's a very big development in South London. And it's separated from the existing residential communities and New Covent Garden Market by this large railway viaduct. We chose to draw and celebrate that railway history of the site quite deliberately. And to do this, we created a new structure, including this one inspired by railway tunnels. And we wanted to kind of create this kind of very obvious wayfinding route through. It doesn't need signage. It uses bright colors to make it sort of abundantly clear that there is something on the other side and it is a route that is open for you to take. So this is going to be clad in wooden panels. And for this, we kind of referenced railway dagger boards, which are the kind of fretwork that you see adorning railway stations. Each kind of railway company used to have their own language of dagger boards. So we wanted to kind of co-create one with people of Nine Elms, sort of specifically for this project. In particular, school children. So we were doing this kind of towards the end of the pandemic. So we kind of did our workshops in two ways. There was a worksheet for people to do at home, which had a video to support it. But we were also lucky enough to be able to work in the schools and conduct a series of workshops actually with the children. And here we wanted to encourage the kids to kind of think about their walk to school and the communities in which they live. And we did this by a sort of series of drawing and mapping exercises before making a series of kind of paper cuts that you'll see in a minute actually form the dagger boards. So we've ended up with these kind of dagger boards designed by the kids that will adorn the future structures. So they're applied to things such as this totem, which is illuminated at night. And also there are sort of directional panels, again, clad with the dagger boards made by the kids that lead you through the underpass. This is the view from the north. And we go back to the south. So we wanted to kind of create this idea that the children can walk past the dagger boards that they created on their way to school, and then they might still be doing so in 20 years' time with their own kids. So it's a very sort of obvious link between the workshop and the final piece of architecture. Next up is Repeat It. So this is another public space design. We're currently working on a market square in Chelmsford. And here we've kind of created a process where we do kind of public consultation sessions and then focused stakeholder workshops. And we repeat it several times. So we have our market stall in the square where we've used kind of elicit opinions. We're asking what they think of the market, what they want it to be. And we've also used this to kind of recruit a stakeholder group that we're now working with. We then take this to a series of workshops where we refine the activities through games and activities. And then we take our findings back and we represent it back in the square, so things we found out. And also we've been asking people to kind of vote on the types of interventions that they might want to see in the public space. So another indirect one. This is a public sector project commissioned by Ealing Council for a co-working and artist studios in West London. And here, instead of kind of doing a kind of co-design process to start with, we actually put on a program of useful events targeted at small businesses and people working in the creative industry. So these were kind of educational events like social media, business management, and things like that. And we used this to kind of build a community before building the building. And it also, again, helped us form a group of people that we could work with to structure and refine the brief. We created a graphic identity that could be applied both to the online presence and the physical space. And this kind of led to a scheme that provided a kind of range of artist studios and co-working spaces. Sadly, the project was canned due to infighting between various council departments. I'm not sure I can say that, so it's not happening, which is a shame. Final principle, live it. So this is about spending time in your designs. So we've designed several office spaces for the software company Accurex. Their products facilitate communication between medical professionals and patients. If you live in the UK and you get a message from your GP, it's probably using their software. And we've been working with them since they were a company of 10 people. We first designed their kind of first purpose-built office space in 2019, which had traditional workspaces, as well as this kind of open plan communal space with bleacher seating for events and this table for lunches and activities and things like that. So during the pandemic, they grew spectacularly, developing new software for video consultation, vaccine bookings, and things like that, and took on a new, much larger office in Shoreditch, which we were appointed to design. This takes a series of former industrial buildings that thread their way through a city block. And it's a multi-phase project, and we've just completed the first phase. This had to be designed and delivered in a very short space of time, so we developed the existing design language and material palette, taking on features that we knew worked very well in the previous office, such as these train garage booths for meetings, lunches, and informal sort of conversations. Other things, they have lots of user researchers, so these phone booths are kind of another element that we found to be extremely popular. We made sure to recycle features from the previous offices, such as the tables and the graphic curtain that references medical and communication technology. And in the center of the office is this canteen space. It's used for large events, but also quite significantly, it's used for lunches. And so now, with the kind of second phase of the project coming, which will see the company grow to 500 people, we decided to kind of take a slightly different approach because we had a bit more time and actually undertake a residency where we moved our practice projects office into Accurex's office and actually had our own office working from their office for a period of time. So we were able to kind of observe and have conversations with various members of the team. Also just listen out to office gossip, listen to conversations, observe how people make cups of tea, observe how the chef makes bread, and sort of see things that clearly don't work. There's definitely a lack of storage. There's a lot of mess. And also sort of things that we didn't really expect, like we didn't know they would do communal flower arranging or have the need for an artisanal vinegar cupboard. We also did kind of slightly more formal studies, such as this kind of hotspot plan that looks at kind of occupancy levels. As you can see, desk areas very low, meeting spaces, communal spaces are used quite intensively. And we're now sort of full steam ahead into the next stage of the project. The base build is underway, and we're kind of working very hard to kind of deliver the concept designs for the interiors. So in conclusion, sort of to sum everything up, beware of participation washing. If it doesn't have a useful outcome and doesn't make a difference, don't waste people's time, don't do it. More small design teams. For large projects, one design team cannot kind of undertake meaningful engagement with all stakeholders. We're advocates for large projects of a kind of master planning approach with lots of small design teams working on distinct areas that enables these strong relationships to be built between designers and the end users. Co-design isn't everything. Keep it limited with clear outcomes. This might be something such as an obvious design feature, such as cladding, or to create the project brief. If you try and co-design everything, it will be boring. Talk around the subject. Direct questions often elicit strange responses that aren't helpful. Activities engender conversations, and it's often the asides from these that are the most insightful. Repeat the process. Take what you've learned and share it to focus and refine. And finally, go back and listen for gossip. Spend a decent amount of time in the spaces you design with the people you've designed for, and you'll see them very differently. Thanks very much.
What a colourful display. You know, architects are said to be afraid of colour. Do you think ordinary people are afraid of colour?
No, I think ordinary people love colour. I think that, I love colour and I always advocate its use. But I think that everything, the world is colourful, everything around us is colourful. There's no reason for the architecture to not be so. But I think it's got to kind of still take the marks of the people that occupy the spaces.
So when you're working with, say, a community, like, I'm not sure what's happening with the sound. It's sort of booming. And I can't see the clock. I wanted 10 minutes on the clock, please. One of the things that occurs to me, particularly with the public projects, like the railway line with the dagger boards and all of that, doesn't it rely on the fact that the community has taken part in that process? And maybe the community in 5 years' time won't understand the meaning of the signs that you're using because they didn't make them.
Yeah, I think.
What happens to the people who weren't part of the original project?
I think that's true, and I think it's something that we do think about quite a lot. But I think that if you make a piece of architecture that sort of doesn't involve anyone at all, then nobody understands it. But I think I would advocate, and I think the reason that sort of trying to make things sort of more tangible and obvious makes it slightly easier to understand. But I mean, there is still a sort of degree of abstraction in there as well, which I think is quite important. We don't want it to be too kind of obvious.
Well, I'm familiar with a few interventions that there have been along the South Bank where there are lots of railway viaducts. I'm talking obviously in London. And there have been various art projects to introduce strange lighting or to the working with the undercroft of the arches. And quite often you'll see them and you think, oh, that must have been an art project. And you can't, they're often quite difficult to decipher.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether your long-termism, I think perhaps is even more important perhaps than you stressed, because either the project should change, evolve in the future maybe, or else a certain degree of re-engagement. Anyway, there are a couple of observations, but I was intrigued by the success of your reduced vocabulary. I think that it's very interesting when you try to pare things down so they really are elemental. and if you'll forgive the term, they're sort of childlike. Is that, is there a coincidence between the fact that one tends, when children are very young, the toys they're given or designed for them are elemental and easy to recognize? Where's the crossover between what you're doing for adults and for everybody, and how we've designed for children?
I think that we deliberately try to make projects that are easy to read. So the kind of the narratives that are embodied within our projects, we don't want someone to have it explained to them. We want things to an extent to be kind of obvious. So things like the hospital, I mean, the lighthouse is a bit kitsch, but it's a lighthouse. You get a sense that the signal pennants, if you don't know what they mean, you might have seen them before. So it's about sort of, we want it to be sort of kind of didactic, but not patronizing. It is playful, it's colourful.
It's a hard balance, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But I think as well, there's quite a lot of like rational work behind what we do as well. There's a lot of kind of function and practicality.
So you're behaving as architects and designers, really, you're just not letting on.
Yes, yeah. And I think you have to. If you're working in an NHS environment, the spaces we've designed...
Of course, they want to know they're going to get a reliable outcome.
Yeah.
But what do you tell the people that you're trying to tease out, kind of to make a contribution to the design process? What do you tell them that you're doing?
It depends on the project. So with the project in Nine Elms, with the children making the dagger boards, we told them very clearly what we were going to create, because actually their role in the process came sort of about halfway through the project. It was a competition, so we'd won the competition with concept designs and the video and things like that. We found that creating a 2-minute video forced us to kind of encapsulate all of the ideas of the project into sort of something that's quite succinct. So we quite simply played the video that we'd created for the competition
but that
to the
video
children.
You'd done some thinking already. So part of the design had been done away from the kids.
Yes.
And then you come back and you try it out on the kids and get them to respond. Yeah.
So it was sort of, again, it was about sort of really like getting the kids to do something that was sort of very obvious and very clear. That was the case in that project, but some of the other ones, you don't even really know what you're designing. Like the children's hospital, we didn't actually have we didn't have a spatial brief. We'd been given a kind of series of rooms that we might want to work with, but there was nothing beyond that. So we used the sort of slightly more ambiguous workshops there to kind of tease out sort of what people might want, but also how they felt about things, and then that was used to kind of create a brief that was sort of refined more accurately into kind of proper spatial interventions with staff.
And what do you say to the suggestion that your work has a sort of postmodern familiarity about it? I mean, you weren't around when you were studying. Postmodernism was probably at the back of the bookshelf. It wasn't really the thing. And yet there was in the last, say, 10 years, there's been a strange reacquaintance with postmodern tenets, as particularly brightly colored elemental things that kind of clash or are discordant. Is that deliberate, or are you unaware of it or want to counter it? Where do you stand?
So I think when I was a student, sort of in the early 2000s, postmodern was a kind of a dirty word. But I think that for us, certainly, again, I think we're kind of rediscovering it, because I think it's useful where things are kind of more obvious and easy to read. So I think it's useful to us when we can kind of make references that are kind of comprehensible by a wider body of people.
You're exploring a communicative and open sort of creating environments that have a looseness of purpose, but a kind of a vitality of communication. They seem to be places that are soliciting a response. They're not John Lewis beige.
They're certainly not.
They're not. Well, I think we're probably time's up, and there's another talk in this space with Peter Cook, who's launching his new book. So thank you very much, James. It was really fantastic.
Thank you.